What's up, everybody? It's DH Thorne here. Well, I'm at work again, and I'm finding that I seem to like to do videos at work. It allows me to just kind of, talk freely when I get a break, and I don't have to set up the camera for a really detailed video like I like to do. And I'm not saying I won't do those anymore. It's just this has been a nice break from the usual way of doing things. It allows me to be a little bit more free with my thinking and just kind of talk more as a stream of consciousness instead of a planned video. This particular video is going to be called the external and the internal world, and how they're basically the same thing. Now, my book covers this a lot, and sometimes it feels like when I am doing these videos, I'm going over the same ground over and over again. But it occurs to me that a lot of people will never understand this, or it's difficult to understand or get through. This is why people go to monasteries for, years to meditate and learn to understand how the internal and the external world are related and interrelated and are basically the same thing. So before I get into this, this is something I want you to think about in meditation while you're doing your magical work or whatever. But this is something I want you to really try to come to terms with. And this is why I tell you that you are the God and devil of your own world. That even if I am wrong about certain things, ultimately at the end of the day, I am technically correct. That the internal and the external world are, for you, all there is. They are all one thing. So let me describe this for a moment. Okay. Everything you've ever experienced, everything you've ever touched, tasted, felt, thought, all of those things happen within your subjective experience. Every rock you've ever picked up and thrown, every person you've ever interacted with, was created in your mind as a kind of dream produced by the biology of your body. Or so we believe, because the biology of your body also exists only as a dream within your mind. Now, that doesn't mean that these things don't exist. What it means is that they exist as they exist only in your reality. When you pick up a stone, or when you look at something, we'll make that a little bit more easy. When you look at something, no one else in this universe will ever see it exactly the same way you do. This is for obvious reasons. For one thing, no one's standing in your exact position at that moment when you're looking at it. So when you look at something, that moment is lost to time and recorded in your memory and your experience. No one else will ever have the opportunity to see that moment exactly the same way as you did. Even something as simple as just a dead leaf lying on the ground. No one else will ever see that leaf the same way exactly as you did, from the same position. Even if you stepped aside a moment later and someone stood in your position, it is still different. Things have changed about it. They are not looking at the same leaf you did. And that means that ultimately everything that we experience is a product of our daydream, of our delusional daydream that our brains produce for us as a response to the impulses from the neurology, the biology, and the world, the universe itself. And our brains and our consciousnesses and our subconscious mind goes through all of this data, okay? And it's basically white noise. If you were to take all of the experience that your brain is experiencing, all of that is an electrical signal, for example, and you were to run it through a TV screen, you wouldn't get a picture of what you see. You would get white noise. You would get static. You would get something that wouldn't make sense to anything. What happens is your conscious mind, in some process that science still does not understand, parses this information and creates an experience for you that is essentially a dream. And you are essentially dreaming about a world that no longer exists, because by the time your mind creates this experience for your conscious mind, that moment is long in the past. So for example, if you were to pick up a stone and drop it, by the time it hit the ground, it will have already been on the ground for a few microseconds before your brain processes that signal. And just in the same way that a lightning strike in the distance will cause thunder that takes a certain amount of time to reach you, your experience of the world is delayed. The lightning strike of an event, this instantaneous moment of reality that happens, is infinitesimally small. It's possible that there is no size to it. And by the time your brain and your experience creates a picture for you of what's going on, that moment has been gone for a measurable amount of time. Scientists can measure this. They can actually measure the time it takes from when you, for example, pick up a hot potato and by the time you feel the pain is long after, usually, when you drop it. You usually drop it before you feel the pain, because there is actually something going on in your biology where you have sort of a secondary reflex brain that will let you drop that potato before it causes damage, before you have the chance to make a conscious decision to do it. And what this basically means is your world, everything that you experience, is happening in a subjective dream that is essentially long gone. Everything you experience is over and done with already. And I'm going to be repeating myself several times, but you need to get this point through. Everything that you experience is a dream of the past that no longer exists. And yet, at the same time, all there is now. All there is the moment that we are living in. It's the moment that exists. That is the only thing that is real, is now. There is no tomorrow. There is no yesterday. There's nothing like that. Those things don't exist. That's not to say that they didn't happen. It just means that they're not in the past. They are simply a now moment that is no longer the moment you are experiencing. We create this idea of the past, present, and future based upon a logical diagram of the universe that our minds and our philosophies have created for us, based upon a pattern of events. We see in our mind something on the ground, and because our logic says that in order for something to be on the ground, it had to get there from somewhere. So, for example, if you see a cup on the ground that's broken, the logical assumption is that it fell off a table and broke and landed there when it broke. Okay? But in reality, that cup is broken, and that's all there is at that moment. Okay? So that is one potential worldview. Of course, there is the worldview that all moments exist simultaneously, which is no different. That means that there is still no movement. There is no change. There is no breaking of the cup. The cup is always broken. It is simply your awareness that is moving from moment to moment. And let that sink in for a moment again. So let's start back at the beginning. The universe is what? Your experience of the universe is a daydream of the past, a thing that has already happened. When I say past, it's a thing that by the time your brain has come to grips with, is long gone. It no longer exists. Your awareness selectively chooses where it is in the timeline. It selectively chooses the past, present, or future. Now, that doesn't mean your conscious mind does this. I've tried very hard to see if I could move my consciousness into the past or the future. I personally have never been able to do this, not beyond a moment or two, by using memory or by using, various methods of meditation. Sometimes you can sort of feel like you're kind of flickering between moments, and it is possible to lose consciousness and so on and wake up later. So there is that. But it seems to me that our consciousness is what moves through time. It's not that time moves. It is that our consciousness moves through this creation of time in our own internal experience. And that brings us back around to the point of this talk. The external world and the internal world are one. They are one thing, and they are all essentially internal, because you are that entire external experience, because you're creating the whole thing. You are a part of that whole thing. In other talks we've had, I've discussed about monism and how you are essentially everything that's going on. Well, this is one way of interpreting how and why that is. You create everything you experience. You are creating the sound of my voice right now in your mind. Nowhere in the universe does my voice sound the way it does as it does in your mind. Nowhere. So keep this in mind with everything that you're experiencing. And now let's try to apply this to magic. Let's try to apply this to spirituality. The reason why Become the Maelstrom uses the symbolism it does and the Trinity of Self and all of these things is because I'm trying to impress upon you this idea that simply by changing your perspective, your awareness, your perception of things, by changing your position in the universe, your understanding of it, you can fundamentally alter what shape the universe takes. I will give you a simple secondary example. Back in the days of colonialism, when the Europeans were settling South and Central America, when they would arrive, a lot of the natives would see their ships out in the ocean, and the story goes that they didn't see ships. They had no concept of what a ship was, and to their mind, they were seeing islands with trees on them, trees with no leaves, and somehow these islands were moving. They had no concept that trees existed. That ships existed. No understanding of that concept at all whatsoever. And so for quite a while, they could not see the ships as separate from the islands. When someone said, see that ship out there in the ocean, see that thing out there, they could not understand it. They thought it was an island moving. They've never seen a ship of that size. They might have seen boats, and that's probably how they eventually figured out what they were. But it took them time, according to the stories, for them to understand what it was that they were looking at. And in the very same sense, your entire reality is like that. You don't see things for how they are. You see them as the symbols you understand that you've created and been taught your whole life. A tree is only a tree because you don't understand it as anything else. If you were to really see a tree for everything that it is, even with our limited understanding, remove all of the dirt, you would realize that the thing that matters most about the tree isn't above the ground, it's below the ground. That the real living part of the tree, the part that tries its hardest to survive and will actually, to a great extent, sacrifice many limbs and many leaves to survive, is the root of the tree. That is the soul, and that is the heart of the tree. The top is just a feeding apparatus that it creates for itself. And we can take this one step further and actually point out and show that our lungs, by a similar association, are in effect extensions of trees, and trees are an extension of our lungs. That the air that we breathe comes from those trees, and so by virtue of co-creation, they are one thing. They are all part of our breathing system. And in the same sense, we are all one in the sense that we all interact and create each other's world, and so on. And we are all one creation, creating each other. It's a co-creation. Now we can take this a little bit further, and we can also point to the fact that our biology, our entire self-awareness, is a thing that we create as a symbol of ourselves. So when we look at our bodies and we say, that's my arm, that's my leg, that's my heart, that's my brain, the brain is creating itself. No matter how you slice it, the brain creates itself. Now that doesn't mean that there isn't a brain out there. That doesn't mean that there isn't a thing that is made up that is the brain. Okay, that doesn't mean that there isn't some kind of energy or matter or something that is a brain. Okay, it just means that the concept of brain, the separation of brain from skull, the idea of neurons from brain, and all of these different divisions that we create are self-imposed created delusions. They're dreams that we've made. And they're very useful dreams. We can use those dreams to do whatever we want. We can say, well, a piece of, say, wood that is shaped like a circle and put on its side can be used as a wheel. Suddenly we've given that circle even more meaning and even more capability and even more reality, but it is still what? It is still just a mass of energy in the form of, carbon that's been turned into fibrous wood. And that fibrous wood is, again, a thing that our brain picks out from what is obvious. So one way to think of it is our entire reality is kind of like a Rorschach ink blot or the white noise on a TV screen when you have it tuned to an empty channel back in the old days. That is us. That is us. That whole thing is us. That static, that blob of light and dark, that blob of not duality, but dialectic, gradient is us. And somehow in all of that noise, a pattern emerges, and that pattern is consciousness. And that conscious pattern recognizes itself. It's a self-emergent property of this event, this static. And this static may not even be moving. It may actually be stationary, and it is our conscious that is moving through the static and deciding what things mean. But somewhere in that static, a consciousness emerged out of that static, out of the random noise. A consciousness emerges, and it begins to make sense of what it sees, and it begins to create a world around it. It even creates a self. And it begins by first differentiating the light from the dark, the white from the black, and deciding that there is a difference, that they're not just the same thing, but two different colors of the same thing. Now, the higher order understanding of this is it's not even two colors, it's not even duality, it is direction, it is vector, it is flow. And it's always flowing in the same direction, but that direction can curve. And this is why in another talk with a person, Dan Updike, I had described possibly that the universe could literally be just one single thread of infinite length, which has wrapped upon itself so many times that from any point on that string, if you were to look out, it would look like an infinite number of other strings creating patterns in it that create reality for us. And maybe someday I'll do a drawing to demonstrate what that could look like. But the point is, whether that's true or not, this string would be motion, it would be movement, it would be directional. Because nature seems to only have direction, if we really break it down. And I can't really get into that as deeply as I'd like, because my understanding of that is not full. But I would urge you to look at people like Nikola Tesla and some other people who describe things that correlate to this idea about the ether, about patterns, about the way energy moves in in directions and so on, and how those directions can be turned. But even those things are nothing more than delusional concepts that our minds have created. So even they are suspect, even they are questionable. All we can really do is create models of reality that make sense to us, that we can use to, well, create science, to create things we want, that we can create technology out of. And even that, there's always a question there of what exactly is going on, because fundamentally we don't know. So we know that if we take a rock and drop it, it lands on the ground, but we don't know why. We really don't know why, not exactly. We know that there's a force of gravity that we often say that it pulls the rock down. The reality is the rock and the earth are pulling each other towards each other. They're falling into each other. From the rock's perspective, actually, the earth is moving towards it. Interestingly enough, if you were to jump up in the air, from a purely scientific perspective, from Einstein's perspective, the earth is rushing up to you, not the other way around. So we have this strange world of paradoxical difference and duality, but all of that duality and all of that seems to be, if you really break it down, if you really ask the right questions, if you really try to probe it, it ends up being the same thing, just a different direction. The north and south pole of a magnet, for example, there's not two separate poles in a magnet. No matter how much you cut it, there will always be a north and south pole to that magnet. So it appears that that magnet is actually a flow from one to the other. So this is a directional flow that's got a vector to it. And the fact that that vector may curve in on itself and create a loop doesn't mean that it doesn't have a direction. Like a Mobius strip, it can go on forever. Well, I could go on, there's a lot more to this, but what I want to bring home to you is that all of this, all of these things that we see as external are internal, and everything that is internal is external. They are one thing, and I like to see them as just simply internal, because they are me. They are all me. All of these things are me. You are me, and I am you. We're all I, just having separate different experiences of I, or what direction I is in. That also goes for the spirits. And they never argue with me when I talk to them about that. In fact, most of them agree. Not all of them, because not all spirits know everything, just like you don't know everything. Not all spirits have the same knowledge or experience. And they may want you to find out things the hard way. They might want you to figure it out. Me telling you all this might be the spark that helps you to realize it, but you have to realize it. You have to be the one that actually says, aha. No matter how many times I tell you this and you say, haha, that sounds true, that sounds true. Unless it really clicks and you know it, you won't be able to make any use of it. The moment this clicked for me was the moment I was able to start making use of it and start to reach out to the spirits as a mature, godlike being again, and start to understand my place in the universe and how to influence it and why I might or might not want to. That goes back to my last video where I talked about, I forget the name of it. I think it was, it was last week or the week before, and it was another video like this where I was just talking. But it goes back to that where you may not decide to make changes. You may decide not to do a spell simply because it's unnecessary or because you want to trust your own energy to guide you where it needs to go. Ultimately, the goal of a sorcerer is to not have to do magic anymore intentionally. The goal of a sorcerer is to become as attuned to reality as they are to a lucid dream. And that is the ultimate goal for an awakened sorcerer, for someone who's an ascended master, is to awaken inside the dream, but not so much that you wake up completely, enough that you wake up and still get to enjoy the power of the dream. That is the ultimate goal. And, I have to admit, I have a long way to go. I talk real big, I act real big, I put on a good show. But I can't just make you believe what I want you to believe. I can't just point at something and have it float in the air, and I'm not even sure that that's possible the way that our imaginations tell us it could be. What I do know is that if I want to lift an object up off the ground, I have every means to do so. I can just go over and do so. So is that the magic, or is it the magic that levitates it in the air like a Hollywood movie? Which one is magic for you? For me, any means of lifting it up can be magic. It doesn't have to be what Hollywood says. And I want to leave you with that thought, that magic doesn't have to be, excuse me, I'm getting hiccups. See, if I was fully awakened, I would just prevent them. Magic doesn't have to be a Hollywood, hocus pocus act where you can just pick things up off the ground with your mind. Because if you could do that, eventually you'd go, well, why do I even have to use my mind? Why doesn't it just pick up knowing that I need it to? That would be the next phase, and so on. So in the similar sense, you don't want to wake up that much, just like in my Godhood for Dummies video. You don't want to wake up to the point where you basically realize that all of this is an illusion, and you stop seeing the illusion to the point where you can't enjoy it anymore. Because the whole reason you're here is to have this experience and enjoy it in one way, shape, form, or another. Even if you think you're suffering, it's still a part of you. The higher part of you is still going, this is cool. Just like when you're playing a video game and your character dies. There's still a part of you going, I love this game. All right, guys, this was a long one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it helped you. And if you have any questions, post them in a comment, and I'll, of course, be putting my little begging spiel after this. So if you want to support me, please stay tuned and listen to how you can do so. Thank you. This is DH Thorne, signing off.
Show me your support by making sure to like and comment on this video. Subscribe and hit the bell for updates, and then, if you wish, share this video responsibly. If you want to support me further, or want to know more about my practice, or learn to master your own, consider purchasing my high-quality book, Become the Maelstrom. The link is in the description. If you need my help, or want to book my professional services, you can contact me directly on Facebook, or go to FromTheAshesPublishing.com and look for my list of services under Magical Services. If you do not see a specific service or ritual that addresses your concern, contact me and I can tailor-make a custom ritual working just for you. The link for all this are in the description. Thank you, and mind the shadows.